Okay, hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcoming Daniel behind the camera and also asking the questions that you have been submitting in the last several weeks. Thank you very much for your cooperation and your constant input of interesting new topics. And so today we want to cover something that comes up so often. It's a question about, does really everybody need therapy? And I'm trying to just find some arguments from yoga, from Ayurveda, and I'm going to have another talk on that despite the questions. And I hope, you will leave some more comments. And by the way, please be so kind and subscribe and comment so that we can be found in the future. Thank you very much. So here comes the first question, please. So that's what he said, the most important question: does really everyone need therapy? And so first we have to see therapy in itself as a privilege. So who has even access to therapy? We put that a little bit aside, but it's a fundamental question. So people, I think, who live in war zones or have been exposed to traumatic life stories, they definitely should have access to therapy. But mostly the people who ask this in the comments are actually having this access to therapy. And so from my point of view, an Ayurvedic point of view, is that we have to see what is defined as therapy. Is it really just psychotherapy that we sit there and we listen and then the psychotherapist, depending on its education and on its orientation, is giving advice, or is merely listening, or is giving guidance, or is giving suggestions? So here we have clearly an overlap into what Ayurveda would then answer. The first thing is, I think everybody needs some kind of orientation, which is much more, for me, a therapeutic tool in Ayurvedic medicine than so much putting that into a therapy. So coming from this point, saying everybody needs support, everybody needs connection, everybody needs time for self-reflection, and everybody needs to have access to health. So this would be my whole picture. And then going into the routine according to what are you bringing to the table? Means in Ayurvedic terms, what is your dosha? What is your health-wise? What can you achieve with that body at your certain age, with your certain kind of ailments, difficulties, stress factors in your life? And I think when we look at therapy in itself, for me, as I wrote in my book, The Breath That Moves Inside You, really the connection between people is the most important. So needing therapy is something that we could replace, in my eyes, by everybody should have access to therapy, but necessarily should be able to regulate themselves with other people around in a safe and happy and supportive environment. If this is not the case and the person is exposed to stress factors, and I know that there will be some more questions according to that, then therapy is a wonderful tool to support the self-inquiry of the person while preventing to fall into the trap that we always have by our own conditioning coming from our childhood, from our culture, and from everything that surrounds us. The question, I repeated, is therapy only for people who are struggling? No. If we look into psychotherapy, I think, as I said, the possibility to access for self-inquiry should be given. But that should be also then given in a safe and connective relationship environment. And with relationship, I don't necessarily mean like an intimate and love relationship. I mean any kind of like friendship relationships in that sense. So having the idea that therapy would remove struggle is completely wrong. When we look into Buddhist scriptures, when we look into Bhagavad Gita, when we look into the scriptures of Patanjali, we are facing that people have always been struggling. Life means struggle in itself because it's unpredictable, and it is always just happening in a big network of environmental factors, social factors, psychological factors. So many factors are coming together to define what life is, and there is never ever a safe space in life itself besides just self-regulation, but self-regulation never alone, self-regulation always in community packed ideas of how we can support each other, and not how can we let each other down, how can we be competitive, but how can we reduce struggling, how can we reduce struggling together. For instance, when I'm trying to make people fit for work, we have to go back to the mere question of Erich Fromm. Is it really that they need to get fit for work because the work surrounding gets more and more stressful, or is it the other way around, that we actually have to look into what is work environment, what is labor? And maybe you remember the other podcast we did together with my friend Daniel Harms, where he is talking about the struggles as an artist. This is still, I think, a situation where we also feel in this part of the world and also in this environment that it's a lot about the privilege, and sometimes privilege can feel like a burden because you feel, oh my God, there are people that feel so much worse and they don't have money and they still go on with life. And then you also get this kind of paternalistic view on poor people. Oh my God, they're so much happier than we are while we have everything. I really don't want to go there because that's a completely different discussion. So misery and suffering is not only a privilege when you get it treated and when you feel you can get out of that. Misery and suffering is unique to every human being in every circumstance and every life condition. And still, we can only overcome misery, struggling, pain by just building stronger communities, building stronger connections, and having our eyes open. And there's something I always stress, that the wellness industry, and that also includes yoga in the Western style, just imposes so much the idea that I have to look after myself first, because when I'm strong enough, then I can help others. No, we can also look at the other way around, not going into helper syndrome here, but we can look at the other way around, that we say that community building and connection building and losing fear of intimate and other relationships actually is the foundation to reduce pain, struggle, and suffering. So for me, this idea in the Western countries to just solve my problems is just feeling like a dead end, because it often leads to isolation and even guilt and shame if I'm not able to solve the problem while there's so much injustice going on in the world. And in fact, when we engage working against injustice, and that's one of the things in philosophy is called dharma, that we feel that there's an inner perspective, there's a duty that I have to fulfill, then we come to this deeper idea of how to get on with my struggles, pain, and suffering, and that is meaning in life. And just to be able to create meaning, again, just get out of your comfort zone instead of increasing everything that feels comfortable by spoiling yourself because you think you deserve it. Everybody deserves happiness, and everybody deserves community and connection and relationships. And so just take it from there, that we try to build more communities and to strengthen communities that are already existing. And I know from the observation with patients that this is something that just reduces the weight, reduces the isolation that people then want to get treated in therapy. Question is, what prevents people from seeking help? Shame. Shame and fear. And shame is in our society, I think it's different also when you look at the United States, where it's kind of even chic, particularly in areas like New York or San Francisco, to go to therapy, because it means, you know, you're mindful and you're working on your shit. In Germany, still, there's a lot more shame. It feels like, oh, I'm not capable in solving my problems. Maybe I'm weaker, because some people say, oh, you just have to pull up your socks and get on with life. You know, there's a lot of dissociation from people who actually have been suffering. Just going back to that idea from my father's generation, where then people said, smacking a child can't be that bad because I got smacked in my childhood. So that actually means I lost so much understanding my own pain that I now can think that this is right, that I got smacked for things that were minor. And so the same thing is then true for avoiding therapy, that people think it is embarrassing to seek help. But I think it is more a sign of strength that you are really ready to face your neediness sometimes. But the relationship with a psychotherapist or any therapist should not replace the need for real relationships. In the end, I know that every psychotherapist is a loving person that enjoy their jobs and they are so supportive and they choose the job for a reason. Me, I choose my job for a reason. But never forget, we're also getting paid for your pain. It sounds horrible. And I know that we are empathic people and we want to make your life better. Okay, so this is nevertheless, but it's very different to having good friends around and having a strong community around where you feel you are living for a purpose. And so I think getting out of that fear also in therapy, because many people say, oh, I can't do therapy on top of what I'm doing with them because I don't want to see what is the root cause. And that's a big difference now between Ayurvedic and yoga therapy strategies, where we say we're actually not looking so much at the root cause, we're looking at the response. So for us, it doesn't matter so much if it was some trauma or if it was abandonance, which is a trauma as well, of course, or whatever it has been that happened in your life. We are looking what is the outcome now and what is your response to daily factors? What happens? Why can't you cope? And the other question is, if you cope with daily stress factors, is this really a sign of health? Very often it is more a sign of deflecting and just ignoring your basic needs. So again, with Erich Fromm saying that when you are fitting inside society, that's not necessarily a sign of health. And sometimes just finding your own slots, just like an artist, or whatever job might take you out of the societal norms, might be far more better your own coping mechanism than just fitting in a 9 to 5 job. So, but facing the fear that we might come out of a therapy and understand that we are not the people that we thought we are is a serious fear to take on. And once people start psychotherapy, which is different to the stuff that I do, once people start psychotherapy, they're very often actually enchanting that they may be much better people than they ever thought they are. With my therapy in Ayurveda and yoga therapy, it is more that we are trying to create a positive awareness and attentiveness to physical reaction. And also through feeling the body as a tool to recognize stress earlier before the mind recognizes it and starts reacting to it. So creating moments of deeper relaxation and therefore prolonged response to stress factors, I feel more home there because I feel that the people are getting more connected to their real needs of support, of their observing their breathing, as an early warning system when something is off. So the key question is, can I trust myself? Can I trust that what I experience, or do I start deflecting my experience? Do I actually rewrite my experience because I think what I'm experiencing now is not true? And that's very typical for people who survive trauma, sexual abuse, abandonment, that they don't trust to what they experience. And Ayurveda and yoga are teaching you to trust yourself, what you experience. So it's a different way of therapy in that sense. Question, can relationships replace therapy? I kind of answered that, but I think here from that person who asked that question, it is more also about intimate relationships, so love relationships. And I think depending on the stress factors and the damage that had been done to the person before, we should also always consider that our love partner is never our therapist. That person is never there to solve our problems and never there to carry our load. They are there to make us aware when we fail and to keep us safe and to be in loving empathy. But we should not abuse our partners ever to just carry the weight of our experiences. I think that's very abusive in itself. And in a love relationship, there is a great way of healing through connection and safety, but we also have to look at realistic views on how many relationships really are so committed that they last for a serious amount of time. Because now we have more kind of what's called situationships, means short-term relationships that end very quickly when shit hits the fan. So relationships can be a playful ground for experiencing new versions of oneself, of opening up, of being vulnerable, but they are not a therapeutic setting. They are not there to process. But we all should be extremely careful when we end a relationship not to throw that on the other person, to be really aware that it's not only being in a relationship but also ending a relationship that needs so much care and love and responsibility that should have been present throughout the relationship, and maybe then it would have not even ended. So in a relationship, I think just really take your time and explore that version of yourself that is not burdened constantly. And just also be aware to declare yourself to the partner. I have this where I sometimes overreact, and it's nice when you point it out. And so I can try to make it a better place for both of us, because sometimes I'm also not aware. When I'm not in a relationship, it's so easy to cheat on myself and say, I'm so wonderful now, I hear it from everything. And the first time somebody else comes up and just runs into my open wounds that I had no idea that they were still there, because, you know, in solitary living, everything is fine, yeah? You're just facing the loneliness, but you're not facing what could come up when you make yourself vulnerable, or when something is going against your confession, against your grain, against your morals, against your thinking, against your standards. So therefore, I propose being in relationships, because only then you can really explore the full version of yourself, not the circumcised version. Can spiritual practice replace therapy? Oh, that's a very good question. Oh my God. I think when you are in a dedicated spiritual practice, often relationship become very, very difficult because your standards are getting very high. And but you are also aiming for a deeper connection with some parts that are higher than yourself. So spirituality these days, what I see in my practice or when I teach in these yoga courses, is something that again is often a way for people who actually are more emotionally avoidant and fearful towards other people. So the withdrawal into a spiritual practice and wearing white and being kind of tied up to so many rules very often just reflects the aspects of too much loneliness, too much space around, and then finding justification. While a real spiritual practice often leads to a different feeling of love that unifies more people, not in the sense of a polyamorous situation, but you feel that you can be loving and kind and empathetic with actually every living being. So defining here relationship and spirituality is already where it starts. And very often for me it is very difficult because I'm trained for, oh my goodness, for more than 50 years in Eastern thinking. I find it often very hard to relate to what I see here in part of the wellness culture or yoga culture, which to me still, I have to admit, that is often very alien. So please forgive me here that I'm sharing my point of view, and I would be very happy if you add more of your own experiences with spirituality, cults, and seeking your own truth and relationship in the comments, so that we can pick up on that for the next video. Thank you. Last question: ultimate purpose of therapy. Therapy doesn't have a purpose because life goes on. So it constantly evolves, and it is just flanked by moments of pain, struggling, disease, losing loved ones. So all the therapies that I'm providing or psychotherapy is providing are there to just give you the confidence that there is still something that makes it worth to live for. And to find that essence where you can hang on to in your darkest hours, that would be the purpose. And I had an experience. I had been still working with a lot of people with suicidal thoughts after experiencing trauma. And there was one woman, and she said, if I don't tell her the meaning in life, she would go home and kill herself. I was like, oh no, meaning of life. So what my meaning of life is not necessarily her meaning of life. And we did something I've never done before, and I never actually did after, because I couldn't figure out if my meaning in life, which is being embedded in this structure of Ayurveda and yoga, and continuing carrying this fire of knowledge, that's not her purpose of life, clearly. And then we kneeled down and we started to pray. I'm not a person who normally prays, and I can't remember that I've been praying since I was 6 years old, but it just felt right, and it was really right for her. And that moment that I showed up, and we connected in this empathy. And so I think therapy in many ways has replaced what religion, in a good sense, used to also offer, and that was support without judgment, support within the community, support through listening, support through giving sometimes some guidance. I know that from Catholic Church, that they were giving rules that people had to follow, so that kept them busy. Yeah. Having the practice of admitting failure, I think that's also quite interesting, that you had to face what you did. So that means teaching accountability. So all these things suddenly are evaporated here, particularly in the city where I live. It's very different to where I live as well, on Malta and Gozo, where spirituality and Catholicism still have a big meaning in everybody's life. So the purpose and the final outcome of therapy is basically that you feel there is life coming in and you might not have an answer, but there is someone close to you who helps you in these moments of darkness to find the answer. So I hope I also answered your questions, and I'm very happy to read your comments and get more support for the channel, so we can continue our work with you. And thank you very much also, Daniel, behind the camera, and looking forward for the next theme. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.